Let me start by saying you are enough. You're worthy of all the greatest things that life has to offer. And I love you simply for being you. I say these words to myself and I offer them to you because I feel like we don't hear them enough. In fact, I think we are met quite often with messages that tell us the opposite more often, that we aren't enough, that we need constant self-improvement in order to be worthy, that something about us is lacking, that something about us is inadequate. And maybe you see these messages, right, when you scroll social media, the endless abyss of social media. And maybe you found yourself comparing your life to the highlight reels of other people's lives, their beautiful houses, their beautiful families, the vacations that they take. Or maybe you see them on the ads, on the commercials that tell you you'd be so much better if your teeth were a little bit brighter, if your skin was a little bit tighter, if we could somehow reverse the signs of aging, you would be better inherently. Maybe you know somebody who has achieved success and they have all the things that you would check the box and say they made it, but somehow they are left feeling unfulfilled, asking what's next. Or perhaps it's you who say, I'll be happy when I lose those pounds, when I land that dream job, get that 6-figure salary, 7-figure salary for some of you, when I buy that dream home or add those 500 square feet to my house, I'll be happy then. And how many times in the past have we said those things, set those goals for ourselves, accomplished those, and still had this void, feeling unfulfilled with where we were? When I talk about self-improvement, let me define what I mean, because I'm not talking about the desire to gain better knowledge. I'm not talking about wanting to develop your character so you are a better person for the world and society. I'm not talking about even wanting to be healthier. I'm talking about those messages that are constant, subtle, and dig at our subconscious, telling us that we are not enough. What if I told you that those messages aren't just harmful, but they're fundamentally flawed, in my opinion? That you are not broken, are not needing of any fixing, and you have everything that it is that you need to be the most evolved, highest version of yourself. You are enough. It's a paradox. We find ourselves chasing to do more, be more, do more, achieve, achieve, and yet we sit feeling unfulfilled for some of us. And that paradox creates shame because when we reach that goal, we're sitting there thinking, what is it? Why do I not feel fulfilled? Why do I not feel happy? Why am I not feeling what I thought I would feel when I achieved these goals? And that shame, research shows that shame is connected to mental health issues like anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. And those things fuel the self-criticism where we're talking to ourselves. And then that gives us this sense of unworthiness. Or on the other hand, if we embrace self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion, those things fuel positive mental health, positive self-perception, and greater life fulfillment. The shift from constantly thinking that we need to self-improve to shifting to self-love and realizing that we are enough just the way we are. And I've dealt with this my entire life. I grew up in a world where defined by poverty. I remember we were transient at times, which is just a fancy way of saying we were homeless at times. And my mom, she never allowed us to sleep on the streets, but sometimes there were times when we didn't have an address to send things to. Grew up around drug use. Some of my earliest memories, 2, 3 years old, were taking a bottle into a bathroom and peeing in it and giving it back to the adults so that they could pass a drug test. And when I talk about adults, my mom wasn't even one of those adults. She was just 14 years old when she had me, a baby. And we grew up in a lot of chaos. Or instead of seeing people being hugged and loved, I saw people being hit. Instead of men in my family surprising women with flowers, they were threatening them with guns. True story. And instead of hearing, I love you, I can still hear the screeches of, I hate you, get away from me. You can imagine coming up in an environment like that. It'd be difficult to love someone else or even love yourself. And as endearing as my mom wanted to be for me, to shield me from a lot of those things that we dealt with, she was often emotionally unavailable to attend to the needs that I had as a young boy. And my dad, he was unavailable as well for other reasons, emotionally and physically. My relationship with him was he'd come by, drop off some money or drop off some shoes, and then he'd hit the streets. He was on the streets. He was involved in activities that landed him in prison when I was 8 years old. And I remember just feeling that void of not having my father and always wanting him and thinking, creating this sense of it was my fault, right? The shame that crept up. Why does this person not love me? Why does this person not show me that they care? Why can't they change their behavior to be in my life? And I got to thinking, like, is this talk really about my childhood trauma and intergenerational trauma, things that I've become far too familiar with? Because I understand how that trauma and shame, how those are linked. And then I got to thinking, I have conversations with people all over the world who don't share my background of trauma, who don't share my background of the shame that trauma has produced inside my body, and yet they somehow still feel that they are inadequate. And so for me, my trauma, it fueled me. I had responses to it, and my trauma responses were not only normalized by society, they were celebrated. The perfectionist tendencies. Has it bothered anybody that this space between this E and that space between this E a little different? I've been sitting here and that's been driving me insane. The perfectionist tendencies, the need to people please constantly, the desire to abandon myself completely to get the job done, to achieve, to do better. And this impacted school. If I got A's, I used to get money for it, and so I could get rewarded. That was external validation for me. I might not get a hug and I love you, but I could get $1 and a smile from you. I was told that if I scored touchdowns, if I scored baskets, that the girls would like me and the girls would bring love, right? And then that trickled down into even where I decided to go to school. I didn't even attempt to apply to a school that wasn't in the top 25 in the country. All of my schools were in the top, and I was like, I don't need a backup school because so much of my identity was wrapped up in those achievements, and this is gonna make me feel whole. And I got into one of those schools, and I did well at one of those schools, and I played ball at one of those schools, and I succeeded, and I achieved, and that led into a really great career where I was being celebrated. I was accomplishing things, and then that led into a business where I was closing deals unimaginable for somebody coming from my background. I found myself celebrated. I found myself awarded. I found myself lying on a cold hardwood floor, crying my eyes out as my wife tried to console me. I was bombarded with anxiety, depression, grief. And those feelings, I didn't know what to do with them because I had been taught achievement was going to make me feel whole. If I keep doing things, if I keep rising and succeeding, that I was going to feel better. And in that moment, I wasn't feeling that. I had success if you looked from the outside in, but that wasn't making me feel any better. I had this moment where I stepped out of my body and I saw myself laying there, and I'm like, how in the world did you end up here? You did all the things right. You defied the odds. You didn't end up like the folks that came from where you came from. How in the world did you end up here? And I know a lot of the trauma and the shame that I carried was one of those reasons. I had lost some significant people in my life. That was a reason. But then all of that was reinforced with these messages that I hear constantly of improve, improve, improve in order to feel whole. But that wasn't working. And so I had to do something different. I got up off of that floor after not sleeping for about 30 days. I finally got rest that night. And the next day, I went to therapy. And I slide that into every conversation I have. When I was at therapy, y'all, I went to therapy. And in therapy with my amazing therapist, Lucy Schultz, I was introduced to my inner child, a younger version of me who's crying out, needing love, support, and validation. And I talked to him. I held him, and I affirmed his worth. And I told him, you are enough. You are worthy of all the greatest things that life has to offer. And I love you simply for being you. I see you. I know you feel misunderstood, but I understand. I'm here for you. You're not alone. I believe in you despite what you accomplish. And I know it's been some hard things that you've had to endure. Trust me, I believe you. As I sat there, holding myself, eyes closed, tears streaming down my face, the tears of an 8-year-old version of me, lost and scared, not knowing which way was up. The tears of a 28-year-old me, grieving the fact that he hadn't been shown or taught how to love himself unconditionally and not even shown unconditional love. But that moment was transformative for me. It was a moment where I found that I could give myself that love and that was the most important love that I needed to do. And I learned a lot of different things from therapy, a lot of different things from that moment of learning and unlearning what I had been conditioned to think. And I think when we embrace this idea that ideas change everything, we have to unlearn some of the things about ourselves and about the world as we've known them. Right? And I got into really, truly practicing setting boundaries and enforcing them. Right? I would set them, but I would let them get crossed, which was an act of self-disrespect and abandoning myself, which wasn't loving. I had to forgive myself because I'm human, just like us all. We have things in our past that we may not be proud of, but forgiving myself for those things. And I embraced self-care. I go by the mantra, self-care is sacred, not selfish. Self-care is sacred, not selfish. Realizing that it is an essential part of my well-being and being able to show up for myself and for others. And lastly, I started to embrace vulnerability. Because vulnerability, we often see as a weakness. If we let those things out to the world, they're going to use them to hurt us. If we let those things out. But I see vulnerability as a true act of self-love. When you start to love all those different parts of yourself and you can expose those to the world without the shame that they carried, that is true beauty. That is true self-love. Because in order to love the person that I am, I have to love all the different parts of my past. I embraced vulnerability. And I know there are going to be skeptics who don't believe that we should replace self-improvement with self-love. And I want to address that because I'm not saying that we abandon innovation, that we abandon growth. I'm saying that we change the motivation. When the motivation is rooted in what's next because I have this chip on my shoulder, I have to prove something to somebody because I feel inadequate, because I feel beneath people, I got to go and do it. That's where the shame starts to spiral. But instead, if the motivation is in loving myself, knowing that I deserve all of these great things that life has to offer, then I go get it. And I start to live I start to walk and talk and breathe and play and act and work like I love myself, all in the pursuit of becoming the most evolved version of myself. Notice I said the most evolved, not the best version of myself, because you are great just as you are. The most evolved version of myself, the version of myself that I love the most. So it's about shifting motivation. So the next time you are feeling inadequate, or you are being met with the unrealistic expectations that undermine your sense of self-worth, I want you to listen, nurture, and I want you to write. Listen to that inner child that's within you, that beautiful little human that needs love, appreciation, and validation. And I want you to nurture that child. Give that child everything that he needs or she needs or they need. Love them unconditionally. Maybe you go and get a toy that inner child needed and wanted and loved. I know for me, I went and got a remote control car because I loved that as a child, and it just brings me so much joy. I embrace play. I incorporate that in my life because the inner child that was always striving to improve and be better, he didn't always give himself that opportunity. Right? Listen, nurture, and then write. Instead of picking up another self-help book promising to fix you in 5 simple steps, I want you to write your own book. Easier said than done, I know. But I'm going to make it easy for you. Just take one line a day where you tell yourself all the things that you love about yourself, despite the things that you do, despite achievements, despite awards. And if you need assistance, allow me to help. You are enough. You are worthy of all the greatest things that life has to offer. And I love you simply for being you. Because I like to practice what I preach, allow me to add, I am enough. I am worthy of all the greatest things that life has to offer. And I love me simply for being me. Thank you.